We need to talk about narcissism and animal abuse. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I have spent many years working with people who are abusers of people and animals alike, and also victims of abuse, as well as I spent several years working with animals also. So one of the content creators made a video about people who consistently, get rid of their animals only to turn around and get another one. And I want to talk about that because I worked with the Humane Society, and I worked at a veterinarian animal hospital many years ago when I was younger, before I started working with victims of domestic violence. And I got to see a lot of different things, and a lot of you kind of get to see the run of the mill when you work there. So one of the things that I've experienced as well is that people who get animals, and then they get frustrated with animals, throughout training, throughout the upkeep or the management of animals, and they get frustrated with animals for the smallest little inconvenience or their stress response or what have you. And so their immediate response is to get rid of them immediately. Sometimes they will surrender them. Sometimes they will leave them behind when they decide to move. A lot of times what I've experienced, and what probably a lot of other people have experienced, especially in low income areas, is this dumping phenomenon where people will literally just drive around the corner and dump their animals, and just kind of leave them in the streets or whatever, to fend for themselves. And and then, it's interesting because people will dump animals only to turn around and get another one, that they'll try all over again. And, they'll have a new story and things that they come up with for getting a new animal. And the idea is they want something that they can control, or they want to, try again with a new narrative. And I think that explains narcissism beautifully, because when you have people who are narcissistic, a lot of people who are narcissistic tend to have relationships, different relationships going at the same time, where they're sort of cycling in and out people. So they idealize, they romanticize, and then they discard, and then they start it all over again. But they're normally cycling through people, and they do the same thing with animals, where it's like, I may have four women or four men on speed dial, right? And so I'm kind of going through each and every one of them. When I'm not with one, then I'm calling the other ones up. Or even if I am with one, I'm still kind of going through and calling the other ones. And I kind of have them, waiting to be rotated through. And the same thing is also very true with animals. People who have a low frustration tolerance will cycle through different animals, but they'll also lose their frustration on their animals, and they will hit their animals, they will abuse their animals, and a lot of times they'll be reckless and or careless, and will kill their animals through neglect, through isolation, by putting the animal somewhere. Like in the woods, or tying it to a tree only to be neglected and not cared for. And I've actually seen this happen, where people have left an animal tied to a tree and it's died, and they thought that, like, oh, it went somewhere, when it's actually still tied there. And so you see that a lot. Another thing that people will do is they'll take their animal to the vet, which I expect to see a lot of this actually increasing. If the United States goes ahead with the inflation, people will take their animals to the vet, or, whatever, and get some procedure only to never come and pick them up. Another thing that I've seen quite a bit with people who have animals, is they want their animals to be neutered or spayed, and so they'll bring them in to be neutered or spayed, and so the animal is already pregnant, they're pregnant, if it's cat or dog, and so they're pregnant already, and they're about to deliver, and they want to have this operation, and so they're like, well, just kind of discard the litter, I don't want it, that kind of thing. And the other way that abuse shows up is through extreme neglect. I think one of the worst things you can see about neglect is like, especially with like expensive animals or animals that are that accumulate a lot of fur. That I've seen is like matting. Matting is, I used to have to groom animals, and so matting does a lot to harm animals. And I've seen it to where it's like an animal will be extremely matted or gone without grooming for so long that there's like, you know, uh, maggots or things like that under their fur, or they're like actually bleeding and they have like sores and things like that. But just that's another sign of narcissistic abuse, unless the owner is like sick or ailing or something like that. Because you do tend to see that a lot of times when you have elderly people or people that can no longer care for themselves. They're kind of put in a position where they're not able to care for their animals, but they don't necessarily want to surrender their animals either, because that's their only companion in a lot of cases. And another thing that I've seen, especially in relationships that go sour with a narcissist, one of the first things that a narcissist wants to do is attack you through your animal. So they'll kind of look for the path of least resistance, and usually that's like animals or children. And so they want to hurt people by hurting your animal, so hurting or killing your animal, taking your animal. I've seen that also, where people will just sort of we break up, I'm going to take your animal even though it's yours, and then they don't want to let you see it. And sometimes people try to work out visitation, or they use that as a means of control, like, you have to come and get your animal back, I know you love that, and so therefore you have to see me, and if you have to see me, then I'm going to use that to my advantage. And so that's one way. But also, too, what we see and what we don't talk about a lot is people will use their anger at you during the breakup to lash out on your animal. There are also people that become enraged. Like, I get it that there's some people, parents, lovers, wives, husband, that may not want you to get an animal, but sometimes when people get an animal, that their significant other or their person in their lives become um, enraged at them for getting an animal. It's like, how dare you do something without my permission? And I think when you see people that have that extreme anger and rage, so much so that they lash out physically, they pull a weapon, or they utilize that time to hurt, like by hitting or kicking an animal or lashing out at that animal, that's another sign of abuse, and a sign that someone is extremely dangerous, not just towards the animal, but also towards you as well. Lastly, one of the things that I will always mention is one of the signs that we look at when we talk about psychopathy, and one of, I think, a telltale sign, and I've seen this in both women and men equally. And honestly, I would probably have to say I've seen it more so in women, surprisingly, than I have seen it in men. But one of the telltale signs that someone is extremely dangerous or pathological is if they they mutilate or they harm animals. And again, in my experience, I've seen this more in women than I have in men, surprisingly, where they mutilate animals, they kill or harm animals, or they attack animals viciously in some way to harm their partner, or just even not even not even to harm a partner sometimes. But when you see it in psychopaths, they do it just because they have the urge to harm or kill. And again, I've seen it more in women. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily the commonality, but it's just what I've seen in terms of the folks that I've worked with.